relief agencies struggle to accommodate people flooded out of their homes by Hurricane Harvey. Humanitarian groups in Somalia are overwhelmed by the scale of the Horn of Africa nation's drought and displacement crisis. And Taylor Swift's new release is one for the record books. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Githu. You are in for Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Tonight we begin in the United States, where the city of Houston is finally getting some relief from historic rain Wednesday as Tropical Storm Harvey pulls away from East Texas and into neighboring Louisiana. Meanwhile, rescue agencies in Houston are struggling to find beds for tens of thousands of Texans forced to leave their homes in the aftermath of unprecedented rainfall. About 30,000 people have been placed in temporary shelters, but more beds are needed. VOA's Ladza Hoke reports.
Some residents had hoped to ride out Hurricane Harvey as the storm hit the South Texas coast late Friday. But after several days of rain, they were forced to leave their homes to look for food.
I didn't even imagine that it was going to be this catastrophic like this. This is horrible.
Some 3,500 people have been rescued from rising water. Police, firefighters, and National Guard troops on Tuesday continued trying to locate those stranded. Private citizens are helping one another.
Can't imagine it. You know, it's gut-wrenching. It touches you to the core. You know, what can I do for my neighbor? Everything else goes out the window. You know, it's just about helping your neighbor.
Since Friday, the storm has moved inland, flooding a wide swath of land with 40 to 80 centimeters of rain. As those that were evacuated need help, others are still waiting to be rescued. The National Guard said Tuesday it has 30 helicopters supporting rescue efforts, but as many as 100 may be deployed in the coming days for a sustained response. A spokesman for the Domestic Operations Unit said up to 30,000 guardsmen, as well as a U.S. naval amphibious assault ship, could be called upon to help out in rescue efforts.
Every military asset that can assist our civil authorities in terms of the response and recovery from Hurricane Harvey is put in place.
Aid agencies are providing food, clothing, and other necessities to help people rescued from their flooded homes. Offers of help are beginning to pour in from across the country and abroad. Houston's Major League Baseball team, the Astros, says it is donating $4 million. The baseball games scheduled to take place in Houston are being moved to fields in other cities. Astros outfielder George Springer says the team is trying to stand firm.
It's tough, you know, it's our home. You know, our guys have families there too. You know, they have houses and all that, and it's tough to be here, you know, but we also understand that, you know, it's our obligation to go out and play hard.
A number of celebrities also have pledged donations to the relief funds. U.S. officials say recovery from Harvey will be longer and more expensive than recovery from any previous storm in the United States. Zlatisa Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
And joining us via phone is Tabitha Awor, a native of South Sudan, now living in Houston, Texas. Tabitha, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you.
Now tell us how the storm has affected you as a family and those living in your neighborhood.
Well, this storm has really destroyed a lot of people. And as for me, I've been locked in since Thursday with my family and a lot of others. We currently live in an apartment complex. So everyone is locked in. People can't go anywhere because all the main roads are shut down or flooded. But how it has affected me is just not being able to go to the grocery store, not being able to go see a friend that is stuck in their house. Or, I mean, like in our apartment complex, a lady on Sunday was in labor, and that was a big scare because all of us the community in this apartment complex was afraid of what was going to happen. If there's other people out there that need to be helped, but the community came together. We ran together in between the apartment complex and went to try to go help this lady with her baby. But end up the National Guards came and lifted the lady to the hospital, thank goodness. Yeah. But the community came together and we rushed to try to get her out.
So Tabitha, what is your biggest concern right now as the storm kind of gets a little away from Houston heading to Louisiana?
It's the rebuild of Houston. I mean, Houston is the fourth largest city in the U.S. and we moved here 3 months ago from D.C. and having to schools are pushed back. You know, kids are not starting school. People homes are still underwater. So there's a lot that needs to be done in Houston. I don't even know where to start. I mean, all we can do right now is go to these shelters and go help out, because if you didn't get flooded, you want to go help others, because there's nothing you're doing right now. You can't go to work. You can't do normal things you do. So now as a community, and for me, all I want to do is just go to the shelters and provide my need, anything that I could to give, my time. I mean, because I'm not doing anything. So, and most, the grocery stores are only open for a few hours, and by the few hours, there's a line wrapping around. Mm-hmm. So if you have water, you want to keep that water and let other people that don't have their water, that don't have water to get in that line. So right now, we're just trying to stay back.
No shops open to get in the kind of groceries at all?
There are shops, but they have time. They have curfew times. So they open at 8 and close at 5.
Well,
and within that, there's millions of people that need that. We've been in since Thursday. So just think about it. People ran out of these things. So people are all waiting in line to get in.
Very devastating indeed. Tabitha, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you, Esther.
Tabitha Award is a resident of Houston, Texas, and a native of South Sudan. Now, over the last year, more than 800,000 Somalis have been displaced due to drought and famine. Humanitarian aid organizations are struggling to cope with thousands of new arrivals in a difficult operating environment in cities like Mogadishu and Baidoa. Now, for more insight into the situation in Somalia's IDP camps, I'm joined here in the studio by Mark Yarnell. Mark is a senior advocate with Refugees International. Mark, you're very welcome to Africa 54.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Mark, you just recently returned to Washington from Mogadishu and Baidoa. How dire is the humanitarian situation in Somalia?
Right, so I was in Somalia in July, visiting both Mogadishu and Baidoa, and those are the areas that have received the largest numbers of Somalis who have fled from rural areas into cities. And just to say at the outset, it's obviously a bit jarring to go from the coverage in Houston to now this other situation in Somalia, but I think it just hits home that no matter where we live, we're vulnerable to these major climate disasters. And in the case of Somalia, it was a series of multiple rains that failed. And so people whose livelihoods depended on farming, on pastoralism, their animals started dying, their lands dried up, and they had no choice but to flee from these rural areas into cities to seek international assistance.
So can you describe to us the situation in the camps where you visited?
So I visited numerous camps throughout Mogadishu and Baidoa, and it's not an understatement to say that the conditions are devastating. Many people who have arrived, they've not yet received any assistance, and they usually use whatever material they brought with them, their clothes, sheets, to construct makeshift shelters. The camps, the sites are very squished together. There's in many cases no latrines, lack of access to water, and that's part of the reason why earlier this year there was a major cholera outbreak that ripped through some of these communities, because the conditions in the sites were so poor.
How do you describe the role of the international community in trying to help those folks there? And also, how is the Somali government coping with this?
I think it's really important to highlight that at the onset of this crisis, there was a robust injection of funds from donor governments, a scale up by the UN, international agencies, and also the local Somali government at the national and federal level is partnering very closely with these agencies to respond. So we do want to give credit to both the international community and the Somali government for staving off what could have been a much worse disaster. The problem is the most recent rains also failed, and so the drought persists and the crisis is worsening, so we really need to keep the gas on the pedal. or the pedal on the gas, excuse me.
Sure. But how effective has this help been when you look at what you witnessed on the ground? Because I'm kind of curious to see whether most people are even able to return to their homes at some point.
Right, and in the immediate term, it certainly saved lives. Part of the longer term problem, though, is that for many who are farmers or pastoralists, all of their assets were wiped out. And for a number of families we spoke with, they said to us they lost their camels, they lost their goats, they gave up their farmland, and they say they may never be able to return home. And so that's, when you multiply that by tens, if not hundreds of thousands, you have whole communities whose livelihoods are wiped out, and now people who had been living in rural areas are now going to be likely in the cities in the permanent term.
Now, you talked about climate change and how this is affecting, desertification, and there are so many frequent droughts, especially in the Horn of Africa, affecting people's way of life. Are these predictable, and is there anything that can be done to cope with the drought seasons when they come?
Right, and that's what we're seeing as a result of climate change, more frequent droughts, so that communities that previously would have multiple years to restock their livestock, that's not happening anymore. And so there are programs to try to work with farmers, work with pastoralists to try to make them more resilient to climate change. But unfortunately, the climate is changing so quickly, and droughts are happening at such a pace. At the same time, we also have to just accept that there will be a very large urbanized community, and how can we help people who can no longer work as farmers or pastoralists integrate into cities and to find jobs in cities?
Mm-hmm. And in terms of health, what were their biggest concerns and needs?
Oh, there were many. I mean, the biggest issue was just because of lack of access to clean drinking water and lack of access to latrines, many people were becoming sick from waterborne diseases. So in terms of immediate interventions, that's the priority right now.
Mark, thank you very much for keeping this up to date, because we don't want it to become another forgotten crisis.
You're exactly right. Thank you so much for covering this.
Mark Yarnell is a senior advocate with Refugees International. Now, a U.S. congressional delegation visiting Nigeria has pledged more technical support to fight the Boko Haram terrorist group. The leader of the group, Senator Christopher Coons, gave the commitment while answering questions from the media on Tuesday in Maiduguri, the Borno state capital.
Strongly supports the hard work of the Nigerian military in combating terrorism, and are grateful for the chance to be here and to see both the response to the humanitarian crisis in northeastern Nigeria and the hard work that is being done to confront.
The Boko Haram insurgency has terrorized northeast Nigeria over the past several years, displacing millions of people. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari chaired his first cabinet meeting on Wednesday, the first since returning from medical treatment in Britain. Buhari returned to Nigeria on August 19th after more than 3 months in London for care of an undisclosed ailment. He has kept a low profile, including cancelling last week's cabinet meeting that raised concerns and criticism that the president was returning to his former ways when he worked from home. Since Buhari's return to Nigeria, his office has released a flurry of photos and statements about his engagements, including meetings with his vice president, heads of the military, economic ministers, and the central bank. A group of investigative journalists whose slogan is "Digging Dung, Fertilizing Democracy" is holding South African President Jacob Zuma accountable over his widely criticized links to a family of wealthy businessmen. Amabungane, which means dung beetles in the Zulu language, was founded by 3 veteran reporters to expose wrongdoing in South Africa. Together with online news site The Daily Maverick, Amabungane in June released leaked emails and documents that they said showed allegedly improper dealings in government contracts and influence peddling by the Guptas, a family with close ties to Zuma. Co-founder Stephans Bruma said Amabungane, which was founded in 2010, had spent several years probing Zuma's family business dealings and had verified the authenticity of the leaked documents.
Our very, very first story as Amabungane was a series called Zuma Inc. And we looked at the Zuma family and how its business fortunes had grown since Zuma took the office of president. And in that first story already, there was, you know, one of the names that came up was the Guptas. And, you know, so over time, there are obviously lots and lots of stories looking at what now would be called state capture, not necessarily by the Guptas, but tender rigging and all this kind of stuff. But a constant theme, interestingly, was the Guptas throughout. So we kind of became the experts in what this family was doing.
Mahalatse Garlands is the chairperson of the South African National Editors Forum.
What Mabungane basically do is to focus on a very important brand of journalism where they spend time to connect the dots, to find, to dig deeper into a whole lot of issues around, especially state and state corruption.
Zuma and the Gupta family says the emails were fake and have denied any wrongdoing. On August 8, Zuma survived an attempt in Parliament to force him out of office, but was left politically wounded after some members of his ANC party voted alongside the opposition. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, could a shortage of labor in the construction industry slow Houston's post-Harvey recovery? Stay with us.
I'm Jeff Selden, and I work the National Security Beat. National Security Beat is anything that affects the national security of the United States, from counterterrorism to surveillance to even relations with Russia. It's one of the most fascinating beats you can have. It's probably one of the more important beats that you can cover because it touches on so many areas of the world, so many areas of people's day-to-day lives. I'm Jeff Selden, and my beat is national security.
How do you see the world?
I see countries in turmoil.
I see our planet changing.
I see people at peace.
No matter how you see the world, you'll get an unbiased and uncensored view of it on Voice of America. On television, radio, online, and mobile. In more than 40 languages all day, every day. Millions of people tune us in.
How do I see the world? On Voice of America.
Now, in Wednesday's business report, Mauritius is the third smallest country in Africa, and it's emerging as the continent's powerhouse. Joining us from New York with more details on why Mauritius is a top investment destination is Africa 54 business correspondent Jill Malandrino. Jill, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. So despite a larger economy and a much bigger population, South Africa's political uncertainty and failure to draw cost-sensitive investors have given way for the rise of Mauritius as the top investment destination in Africa. Mauritius overtook South Africa in 2014 to become the continent's most competitive economy, benefiting from a long history of political stability, a good governance record, and an open and flexible regulatory system. The tiny island country is regularly hailed as one of Africa's success stories since it gained independence in 1968. Mauritius has had an excellent record of peaceful transition of power, with free and fair elections taking place on a regular basis. The buying power per capita is one of the most impressive in Africa at nearly $19,000 US.
So, Jill, what is Mauritius doing right that is making it so attractive?
Surya Hay, she's the executive director at Bravura, told CNBC Africa that Mauritius has policy certainty from a tax perspective and the government is benign, not getting too involved in business. Meanwhile, South Africa has done almost the exact opposite, with years of political uncertainty and questionable policy direction, and the government has used regulation and red tape to make business operations in the country very difficult.
And what industries has Mauritius invested in?
Mauritius has been successful because the economy is diversified compared to South Africa, that is married to mining, or Nigeria and its dependence to oil, although both countries are making a push for diversification. Despite sugar being a major export for decades, Mauritius has managed to successfully diversify its economy, mainly by investing in the manufacturing sector. Initially, the focus was placed on the production of textiles and clothing, but recently the country started exporting jewelry and watch components. But here's the key. Other areas of rising economic activity include tourism and finance, especially banking and business outsourcing. The boom in global fintech is only in the beginning stages, and that could continue to bode well for Mauritius.
Jill, as always, thank you very much. That's Jill Malandrino, Africa 54 business correspondent, reporting for us there from New York. Now, returning to our top story, rebuilding efforts in areas devastated by Hurricane Harvey's heavy rains and flooding face higher costs and some delays because the construction industry has a critical shortage of skilled workers. Construction problems add to the growing economic impact of closed airports, seaports, retail stores, and vital oil industry facilities. VOA's Jim Randall reports.
Rescue workers have been searching for flood victims amid thousands of calls for help and floodwaters that continue to rise, damaging homes, businesses, and infrastructure. The massive job of rebuilding Houston and other areas Harvey hammered will cost more and take longer because there is already a shortage of skilled construction workers like carpenters and bricklayers and of skilled people to manage projects. The Associated General Contractors of America found the skills shortage hit 70% of their members. Ken Simonson is the chief economist.
In many cases, it means delay, that it will take longer because companies that are hiring subcontractors can't find ones willing to bid, or the subcontractors say, we'll get to it after we've done this job.
Simonson says construction jobs have evolved from pick and shovel work to high-tech tools like GPS and lasers. His industry is urging schools to offer more classes in construction skills. The storm has caused major damage to important assets. But a Cornell University expert says economic tools measure the impact poorly because they count rebuilding efforts as an economic boost, missing the cost of losses. Business professor Stephen Kyle.
So in order to really get a handle on this, you would have to know what all of the houses, machinery, buildings, roads, what they're worth. And to be honest, we really won't know what all of that damage is until we actually go in and try and rebuild.
Oil infrastructure is vital to the economy, and Kyle says whatever was damaged will be rebuilt quickly because companies need revenue from the facilities. Disruptions are still expected to raise the cost of gasoline in the United States by as much as 6.5 cents a liter, at least for a while. Houston is the 5th largest U.S. container port. According to data analysis firm Panjiva, the storm stalls the thousands of containers that usually move through Houston daily, carrying auto parts and other goods. Oil shipments are also blocked. In normal times, Houston's airports handle 1,600 or more flights per day, but they are currently closed by foul weather. Jim Randall, VOA News, Washington.
It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Taylor Swift's record-breaking new release. We'll be right back.
Hamilton Live is a live audience performance. With live music, you have that interaction. There's nothing like getting that immediate feedback from the folks that you're performing to. They feel it and they respond back to you. You see it in their eyes. You know that you're connecting with them. Like if any form of communication, it's that response that you get back.
And welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Spotify says Taylor Swift has set a new global first-day streaming record. Last week, the music delivery site logged more than 10 million same-day streams for her new single, Look What You Made Me Do. The 27-year-old singer dropped the much-anticipated song late Thursday to streaming platforms and iTunes. The official video for Look What You Made Me Do, which debuted Sunday at the MTV Video Music Awards, has also broken Adele's record for highest number of views within 24 hours on Vevo. The lyric video also broke records with more than 19 million YouTube views on its first day. Next up, the esports gaming scene has grown from strength to strength. Festivals like Insomnia in the UK are attracting around 70,000 visitors over a weekend, with minimal millions watching the action online. But as the fan base grows wider and the prize pools increase, is it time for esports to become an Olympic sport? Experts say yes, especially now that a stumbling block has been removed. The question of whether there could be an audience to watch gamers play games has been answered, with more young people tuning into live gaming streams on YouTube. Esports could be added to Olympic competition as soon as 2024. And finally, Britain is set to conduct road trials of semi-autonomous trucks. The Department for Transport says that up to 3 trucks or drones will travel in a convoy connected by radar, GPS, and Wi-Fi, and with braking and acceleration controlled by the lead vehicle or platoon leader. Officials say the formation saves fuel and reduces carbon emissions because the lead truck pushes air out of the way, making others more efficient. They claim fuel consumption and emissions could potentially be cut up by 20%. The first trials will be on test tracks, but the first platooning vehicle tests on major roads could happen by the end of next year. And that's what's trending today. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching, and a very good night from Washington.
Welcome to English in a Minute. An alley is a narrow path between or behind buildings.
Up one's alley.
Does this expression have to do with city streets?
Jonathan, do you have any friends who teach singing?
Hello. I am a singer.
You are? Oh, awesome. Do you